Welcome to this video, which is going to run through the 4 different types of elasticity and focus on how to calculate each different type and what the answers to those calculations mean. These are the 4 different types of elasticity that we're going to be focusing on. We're going to start with price elasticity of demand. They're going to move on to look at cross elasticity, income elasticity, and lastly price elasticity of supply. So, in terms of price elasticity of demand, you've got your key definition there. It's about the responsiveness of demand to a change in price. Throughout this video, each type of elasticity will have a definition. In terms of making sure you maximise your marks in the exam, always make sure that you are using the precise definitions you are given. And we've got the formula there for calculating price elasticity of supply. The percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in price. So we're going to use that formula in our example coming up. So in our example here we have quantity demanded going down from 6 to 8 and price increasing from £10 to £15. So looking at demand first, we're doing a straightforward percentage change calculation here. So that to do that we look at the change in demand first of all. So change in demand of -2 divided by the original demand, which is 8. And to convert it into percentage, we times it by 100. So that gives it a value of 25. Sorry, minus 25. In terms of price has gone up by 5, so it's an increase of 5 plus 5 divided by original price of 10 and times that by 100. That gives us a value of 50, and so we divide those by each other. So we got minus 25, that should be plus, divided by plus 50, which gives us minus 0.5 as our answer. When we look at answers to PD calculations, we first of all bear in mind that for price elasticity of demand, the answer is always going to be negative. You think back to lessons on supply and demand lines are always downward sloping. They've always got a negative correlation between price and quantity. So therefore, mathematically speaking, our answers for this calculation are always going to be negative. But what's important is to consider the angle of that line, whether it's very steep, in which case it's an inelastic good, or whether it's very shallow, in which case it's a very elastic good. Now, if that answer we get is less than 1, doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. When we look at other elasticity calculations, we'll find we get positive answers sometimes. That doesn't matter. The focus is on the actual value. Is it less than 1 or is it more than 1? 0.5 is less than 1. So 0.5 count as inelastic demand. If it's exactly 1, it's unitary, i.e. there's a proportional relationship there. If it's more than 1, then it counts as elastic. So always bear in mind when you're doing any sort of elasticity calculation, any of the 4 different types, you focus on the number that you've got. If that number is less than 1, it's inelastic. If that number is more than 1, then you know it's going to be elastic. And we'll look at lots more of those as we move on to some other calculations. Moving on to look at cross elasticity of demand, you've got your definition there, and the key thing about cross elasticity of demand is we're looking at 2 different goods. We're comparing that relationship between price and quantity between good A and good B, and the formula, as you can see, is that percentage change in quantity demanded of good A divided by the percentage change in price of good B. So we're going to move on to look at an example now. So we're going to be looking at chickens and turkeys. So if the price of chickens goes up from £4 to £5, and because of that, demand for turkeys increases from 100 to 110. So looking at that demand calculation, we have plus 10, which is the change in demand, divided by 100, which is the original demand, times that by 100 will give us plus 10. In terms of the price, we have an increase in price of 1, so plus 1 divided by 4 times 100 gives us 25. And so plus 10 divided by plus 25 will give us an answer of plus 0.4. So our elasticity answer here for cross elasticity demand between chickens and turkeys in this case is plus 0.4. So an answer of plus 0.4, first of all, is less than 1. So therefore, the relationship in this case is an inelastic relationship. And is a positive number. So thinking back to our diagrams that we drew a lot for supply and demand, ignoring the fact that we've always drawn negative sloping demand lines. Now it's slightly different here because we're looking at cross elasticity of demand. As you can see on our axes, we've got the price of chickens on this axis and the quantity of turkeys on this axis. So we're not looking at one good now, we're comparing between the two different goods. And so we have this positive value for our elasticity calculation, so that tells us that our demand line is going to be upwards sloping like this one is here. And because it's a positive answer, because that demand line is upward sloping, that chickens and turkeys are substitute goods, i.e. people will either buy a chicken or a turkey, they're not likely to buy both. Moving on to look at another example, this time we're going to be looking at the demand for tennis balls, which has fallen by 20 tubes to 180, and at the same time as that, the average price of a tennis racket has risen from £30 to £36. So looking at the demand first, it's fallen by 20 to 180, so we're looking at minus 20 being our change in demand. Our original demand therefore would have been 200, so minus 20 divided by 200 times 100 to convert it into a percentage will give us minus 10. And look at the price, we've got plus 6 divided by original price of 30 times by 100 will give us plus 20. So to calculate the cross elasticity of demand here, we've got minus 10 divided by plus 20, which is going to give you minus 0.5. So our elasticity answer in this situation is going to be minus 0.5. Looking at what that means, it's a minus 0.5 here, so 0.5 telling us it's inelastic because 0.5 is less than 1. And the negative value here, as you can see on our graph, shows you that there's a negative correlation between the price of tennis rackets and the quantity demanded of tennis balls. So note this is a slightly different sort of diagram to what you were drawing in your lessons on supply and demand, because we're comparing the price of one good to the quantity of another good. So because of that negative value, we say that tennis balls and tennis rackets are complementary goods, that they go together. So therefore the price of tennis rackets would affect the demand for tennis balls and vice versa. Moving on to look at income elasticity of demand. Hopefully by now you've noticed that there's quite a strong pattern between the definitions and the formulas used here, so it's just slightly different words, but the actual calculation is basically the same style of calculation. This time we're comparing demand and income instead of demand and price. So looking at how responsive consumers' demand is to a change in their income. So for example, if someone's income increases from £60,000 to £66,000, and as a result of that they increase their spending on holidays from £2,500 to £3,000, this is how we would calculate their income elasticity of demand for holidays. So focusing on demand first, we have a £500 change in demand. The spending on holidays in this case represents the demand for holidays. So plus 500 divided by original demand of 2,500 times it by 100 will give us plus 20. Looking at the income change here, it's plus £6,000 divided by original income of £60,000 times 100 will give us plus 10. So therefore we've got plus 20 divided by plus 10, which gives us plus 2. Looking at that plus 2 value, it's 2, which is greater than 1, so therefore the relationship between this person's income and their demand for holidays is an elastic relationship. And it's a positive value again, it's plus 2. So our demand line in this particular case is going to be upward sloping, the positive relationship between income, which we've now put on our vertical axis instead of price, and in this case the quantity of holidays demanded. So for this, we would describe this as a normal good. Now most goods in the economy are considered to be normal goods. In most situations, the more income you have, the more you're going to spend on the majority of stuff that exists in the economy. But there are a few exceptions to that, and we're going to look at one example of that in our next calculation. So in this situation, income has increased from £25,000 to £30,000. Because of that, this person's demand for Tesco value baked beans has fallen from 50 tins a year to 30 tins a year. So the change in demand is going to be minus 20 divided by the original demand, which is 50, and times that by 100, which gives us minus 40. And the income increase is an increase of 5,000 divided by original income of 25,000, times that by 100. It's going to give us plus 20. So we've got minus 40 and divided by plus 20, which gives us minus 2. So minus 2 there is our elasticity answer here. So a value of minus 2, again it's 2, so 2 is greater than 1, so it's elastic. We've got a negative correlation between income on our vertical axis, and in this time quantity of Tesco baked beans, Tesco value beans, on our horizontal axis. Good. We describe this as an inferior good. And as you can see here, inferior goods are where, as your income increases, your demand for that good decreases. So people would probably switch, maybe they might switch to buying Heinz baked beans instead of Tesco value baked beans. Moving on to our final calculation here, price elasticity of supply. All we're doing here is we're taking our original first calculation that we looked at, price elasticity of demand, and we're changing the word demand for the word supply. So that's responsiveness of supply to a change in price, and we're calculating the percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. Other than that, exactly the same logic and rationale to doing our calculations. So in our example, we've got price increasing from £10 to £15 and quantity supplied rising from £8 to £10. So looking at that supply first, that is an increase of 2. So we've got plus 2 divided by original supply of 8 times that by 100. That gives us plus 25. Looking at price, we've got an increase of 5 plus 5 divided by original price of 10 times that by 100. That gives us plus 50. So to calculate price elasticity of supply, percentage change in quantity supplied divided by percentage change in price, which gives us plus 0.5. So it's a positive value. If you think back to lessons on supply and demand, supply curves are always upward sloping. So when you calculate price elasticity of supply, it's always going to be a positive answer. And here we've got 0.5. That tells us that this is an inelastic relationship here. So, like I said, price elasticity of supply will always be positive. If you get an elastic answer, i.e. an answer greater than 1, that tells you that producers are able to quickly respond to changes in price. These would probably be manufactured goods where you could easily get your workers to work some overtime to produce more goods. Inelastic values will be where producers can't respond straight away to a change in price. So, for example, agricultural goods, it takes time to grow those products. You can't simply create some more apples, you've got to plant the trees, wait for the apples to grow, and so on. And so, just to conclude, we've seen this diagram before, but just to recap it, if we have an answer of 1 to our calculation, that means it's unitary elasticity. If we have an answer of less than 1, that means it's inelastic. So if you were drawing a diagram, that would be a very steep line on your diagram. If it's greater than 1, it's elastic, so that would be a very shallow line on your diagram. And don't forget, ignore that positive or negative value when you are determining the elasticity of a product. Just focus on the number itself. Is that number greater than 1 or less than 1? And in terms of all our different types of elasticity that we've looked at here, PED, or price elasticity of demand calculations, will always be negative values. PES, price elasticity of supply values, will always be positive. For cross elasticity, if you get a positive answer, you know that is going to be substitute goods there, two goods that are kind of in competition with each other, you have one or the other. If it's negative, you know it's complementary goods, two goods that complement each other, they go together. For income elasticity, if you've got a positive answer, that means you're looking at normal goods, like holidays. If it's a negative answer, you know, looking at inferior goods, like Tesco value baked beans. And so that concludes this explanation of the different ways of calculating different types of elasticity. There's lots of information there, so if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me on Twitter @DizzleEducation.